our shop talk list, I guess you would say. We have, who's not paying attention, Adrienne and Lyle. Hello.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming tonight. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to talk about, so we will see.
Tell us everything.
Yeah, right.
Everything.
I just returned from the World Cup finals with Salvino, and that was a really, really fun experience. So I think that's kind of the main thing we're going to touch on. This was my first World Cup. I've done an Olympics and 2 World Equestrian Games, but I'd never done a World Cup. I'd been in shot for qualifying with it before with my horse Wizard that I rode, but he was not a good indoor horse. The time I tried to show him, the last time we tried to show him in the World Dressage Masters, he took off down center line and almost jumped into the judge's box. And I saw Stephen Clark bailing out of it, and so we decided not to take him and put him in that kind of indoor environment. And so it's something that I've always really wanted to do, and Salvino is a horse that handles it really well.
Are the World Cups always inside?
What's that?
Are they always inside?
World Cups are always inside, and technically the qualifiers, but written in the rules, have to be in an indoor show. We in the U.S. get an exemption because there, as far as I know, absolutely no indoor CDIs in the States, which is very different. So the horses in Europe are showing constantly all season in indoors, and it's a completely different ballgame. Some horses can handle it and some just can't. It's way tighter. It's, you think global on Friday is electric. Now you put a roof on that and move everyone closer. And then you have that. And so
Are they noisy too, the audience?
very, yeah. It's, and just the whole setup, because no big indoor stadium is ever built for dressage. It's built for hockey or it's built for basketball, and then it is adapted to be a dressage ring. So I posted a video on my Facebook page, I don't know if any of you saw it, of the trek that we had to take from the barns, down through a parking garage, all these winding things through this little narrow place that was the hockey dressing room. Then you go up the tunnel into the actual stadium, and so just all those challenges, so much more than just riding through the test. To have a horse that can do the indoors is a whole really different special mentality. And like I said, we don't have a chance to practice here. So these Europeans were going every weekend again and again to an indoor. This was Salvino's first ever indoor experience. So we kind of gambled. I was really hey, let's hope this goes well, because we have nowhere to practice. So we get to practice at the finals.
Did you give him any kind of a supplement, to a calming supplement?
I don't, no, not with him. For one, I'm so terrified of drug testing rules that I'm incredibly.
Well, things that have been shown to be illegal.
Yeah.
Like magnesium or something.
Yeah, no, Salvino is really quite good with it, and so he actually feeds off the energy in a really positive way. And I thought the first day in the Grand Prix, he was a little wide-eyed. There's one corner where all the cameras were, so you're coming on the diagonal, and as the camera clicks, it's to extended track gets bigger, they click faster, 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 and he was whoa! It sounds like he's going into gunfire. And then by the second day when we got to the freestyle, he was already much more relaxed, so I was lucky. I remember having a moment in the freestyle where I actually was able to look up and kind of look at the crowd, which I don't think I've ever was able to do in an indoor, because on Wizard I was always kind of holding on for dear life. So he really enjoyed it, and it was really a treat to get to ride a horse. It was like the crowd and the energy.
How do you choose your music?
That is a really fun, interesting process. What we did with him is I wanted something that reflected my personality. I'm a big music fan. I like, rock and classic rock and all that kind of stuff, but he's also a very elegant horse, so I wanted something that reflected power, but yet was elegant, and we went through a whole bunch of different songs. I also wanted something that was uplifting. I felt and reflected our country and stuff in a really uplifting way, and so I ended up going with the main song was a Bruce Springsteen song called The Land of Hope and Dreams, and that is in itself was a process, because to get the music licensed is not easy. He doesn't license any of his music commercially like most artists do. So we ended up getting in contact with him directly and asking for permission.
Wow.
And he said that, yeah, we could go ahead and do it. And so then Terry Gallo does my music, and she does a wonderful job. And so she kind of figured out the songs and the arrangement, and then they take it actually into a live studio. So they went into LA, and they have someone who composes the sheet music. and they actually write an original piece of music for it, and then get a band and a choir and everything in there and record it. And so I was getting like little snippets, you know, like here's the choir, you know, and here comes all the big ladies in singing, and you know, like here's the guitar player, and it was really cool.
So then with your horse, so it's not that the horse has his freestyle set up as much as the music there and you fit the horse to the freestyle?
No, so the way that we started is we do the floor plan first. So I figure out what movements highlight him the best.
Okay.
And now they have a new way of scoring on a computer system for the degree of difficulty. So you can go through and you can calculate, okay, if I do a double pirouette into a line of changes, it's this much degree of difficulty. If I do a double pirouette into a line of changes on a turn, it adds a little bit more. So you can play with all of this. You try to get your degree of difficulty. Mine's like 9.2, which is pretty high.
Yeah.
And so first I come up with a floor plan that I like, and that has to come first. And then I find music that fits with them. So we spend a lot of days just playing music. You know, I'm playing music in the background, and sometimes I'm just riding around, and I'm like, "Do you hear this? I'm like, this sounds really good." I'm like, stop, and I like look at what song's playing and take notes of it. So you just have all of this in your mind, and then they take this song and they can arrange it differently, however they want to fit the floor plan. So that when there's a pirouette, they don't just play the song start to finish. They can take a chorus line for here, and they can take a lyric for this, and so they really build it around your floor plan. Yeah, it's a really cool process. It's a lengthy process. And
costly.
And costly, yeah, to do it that way for sure. I mean, there's for sure ways that you can do it, you know, a much more simple one. You can do it something on your computer and edit songs together and stuff, but to really get one for the international stage. And when you put it on a venue like the World Cup, the sound system's like incredible. You know, the speakers, it just sounded really, really, it was a beautiful piece of music, and I was really happy with the way it turned out at the end of it.
Do you create it and then change it because there were a part that didn't fit, kind of, or?
Yes, and that's like the scary part about doing a live studio recording, because you got to figure all that before.
Commitment.
It's a huge commitment. So I had only ridden this freestyle twice in qualifiers, and the World Cup was only the third time. And the reason being, because last year I kept like pushing off the final recording, because as you know, like as they get more trained and more fit, the tempo changes. So she'd come back every month and she's like, this trot tempo's different. So then she'd have to rework the whole thing. Now his canter tempo's different. Now you're covering more ground, less ground. And so I was like, really pushed it till the last minute, because once you go in and do a live recording, you don't want to go back and change it. It's astronomically way too expensive.
Wow.
Adrienne, after you got through all those tunnels, then was there a place you could warm up? Or did you
There
have
was,
to
we
warm
warmed up in the, I think it was like the junior hockey stadium originally, because you could see all the little bleachers and stuff on the side and the little locker rooms. So it was you kind of walk through the underground parking lot, and on the side there they'd put in a ring. And the footing's fabulous. I mean, they did a great job. They've been doing this for a long time in Gothenburg. And you warm up there, and then you still have to walk a little bit farther to get into the main stadium. So we always time when you get on how much time does it take to get to the warm-up, and then how much time does it take from the warm-up to the show ring, so you know when you calculate your warm-up time to put all those little things into it.
What was the temperature?
Outside was quite cold. Inside it was really cozy actually. So once you were down below, it was pleasant.
But did you have to go outside in the trip?
The stabling was outside.
So you had
The
to-
stabling was kind of between like a sports complex and the stadium. It was kind of built in the parking lot essentially, like tent barns and stuff. So you walk down the parking ramp, and then it was all inside.
It must have been really cold outside.
It was chilly the first day, for sure. Yeah, I think it was like in the high 20s the first night, and then it actually warmed up. And I'm from Idaho, so
What do you think the longevity of the horse is when the trainers, like some people that they show the same horse so much that the judges seem to not always, as you have your little thing and you're rating the person, whatever, on your app and all. What do you think the longevity is of certain horses when judges finally get to a point where, okay, we know he's fabulous, but we need a new fresh face? Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Because I know someone personally that had made it to the Olympics as reserve champion, and I think she had one of her horses, and I think something happened in that situation with her.
Yeah, I mean, I think you for sure, when you have a horse that's at the top, show it very selectively, first of all. You know, you present it, you know, maybe 2, 3 times, 4 times a year max at big shows, so that it's not getting repetitive, I guess, or dull for the judges. I mean, I can't speak to the judges' bias necessarily of the way they think it, but I always like to show and then give myself enough time that the next time I go back out, they think, oh, that was a little better. Although that was a little better than last time, I can give that half a more point. So rather than just going out and repeating the same test, I always try to, as much as possible, make sure I have enough time to train in between that they think that it's on an upward trajectory. Kind of see.
You need to change your freestyle every time you do a competition.
I personally, I don't think so. I think it's kind of fun when horses have a home, a signature freestyle. You can mix it up. A lot of people you'll find will mix up the choreography a little bit, and you can go in with your music and they can kind of change some stuff around without having to go back and redo the whole thing. Or maybe you find you don't like one line, or you want to make it a little more difficult, so you're going to put a full pee-off pirouette instead of a half pirouette to mix it up a little bit. But personally, I like having that horse's music. Like with Debbie and Bertina, you're always like, oh, this was her music, and with Ravel, oh, this is his music, and I think that's really cool when people associate that with that horse and kind of that makes that their signature. And I had used for last season when I did Salmino, I've used Wizard's old freestyle for the reasons that we talked about, the cost and all that, of not wanting to commit to a new one until you needed to. So I like the old freestyle too.
Do you like the new system of where you have to tell the judges?
I see the pluses and the minuses, for sure. I think that trying to make it more objective so that it's not just randomly the judge says, oh, that was hard or not hard. I think that makes it more fair. What I see being the drawback is that there's a real temptation for 2 things. One is to fit the absolute most stuff you can do. And I see some freestyles losing the harmony and losing the dance of it, you could just tell they're trying to put every difficult move. They went through the sheet and trying to do every difficult move they can possibly cram in 6 minutes. And so I think you lose a little bit of the artistic effect there. And then also, a lot of them I think are going to be drawn to looking similar because there's certain combinations that give you the most points. And everyone knows what that is. You do X, Y, Z in a row, and that's the most points you can get. So I see both sides, and I think it'll continue to evolve a lot. We met with the people who created it before the World Cup. We met with them before the WEG, and they're always open to suggestions. And so, some of this, I'd say, this one's not really clear on how they're judging this. What exactly is one thing we were talking about is what is a bent line, because the standard says changes on a curved line, and then some of the judges weren't accepting it because they said the line wasn't curved enough. And I said, well, if it's not straight, it's curved. So if that's going to be the way it is, then you need to say it needs to curve at least this many degrees, And so I think they're going to go back and, to change that. So.
Having competed in Europe, do you find you're more comfortable here in Wellington or on American soil, or is it still way more exciting to go there?
It's always exciting to go there for sure. The atmospheres that they have at some of those places are hard to reproduce here. We're very lucky in Wellington, I think, to have the biggest atmosphere of any place in the U.S. for sure. I mean, coming here, because we used to go to California, and the first time riding under the lights here was like, whoa. And that was a really good preparation for Europe because it's electric here and it's fun, and then the crowds are full and that's a really cool environment. Europe, it's just you go to different venues. That's one advantage there.
That's the point. Do you feel that, again, not putting anything down here because we're very fortunate, but the fact that the horses and the competitors don't get to experience other locations.
Yeah.
That it's a drawback when you have to go to the other side of the border.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is for sure. I mean, the advantage of what we have here is that it's so convenient. We can go show and go home and do the clients and all that stuff. But it definitely, when the Europeans are showing in a different venue every single week, their horses walk into anywhere. No big deal. But they're, you know, we're so much more spread out that just the logistics of our country in general is a whole different ballgame of figuring out how to make it best work for us.
The other thing you said was about the DOD, that people start to try to jam as many pluses things,
Yeah.
combinations, and it starts to look mechanical or whatever it's choose. Going back to 15 or 20 years, in all the top levels in Europe, you'd see the same combinations of movements. You could copy somebody's thing. They weren't being marked for each degree of difficulty, but it was clearly more difficult or it was more challenging,
Yeah.
so everybody wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So I don't think that part has
New.
changed as
Yeah.
much, you know. Now we have a different goal.
Goal,
It's
yeah.
how many points, you know.
I do remember my first time I was in Rotterdam watching, I don't think I was showing, and Hans Peter and Edward rode their two horses to the exact same choreography, and they wanted Edward to win because he had the better horse, whatever, and he scored much higher in his degree of difficulty. This is before the system was in place, so I was watching that and I was like, okay, but then you really see why we do need a system. They literally just rode the exact same freestyle, and one scored more difficult than the other when it was the same floor plan. And then, you know, it's hard for the judges to watch score all of that and keep in your mind everything they did. So I think the judges appreciate it.
From that point of view, I agree with
Yeah.
you. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. I can't imagine trying to keep all of that in mind. Let alone figure out if they did the movement in what order and all that.
Couple of questions. I had a friend who sent me 14 questions. We'll start with a couple of them. She couldn't be here. She had to leave. But one of the ones that she asked, which I thought was interesting, was what was the most difficult moment during the World Cup competition from get-go to the end?
Well, what was most difficult for this competition wasn't so much in the competition as it was getting there. It was a lot of travel. By the time we got there, 4 days on the road. You know, not being in one place long enough that we could even ride. So again, it's our disadvantage. You know that some of these Europeans can haul in. They've been schooling at home and they can haul in. I think we hauled to the airport on the 28th of March. We flew out on the 29th, so we landed on the 30th. We spent the night in the Amsterdam Animal Hotel that night. Then we drove like 5 hours to Pilates' place, and we were there for like 1 day. So I was able to like lunch him a little bit there, and then we loaded, and it was a 15-hour drive from there in Germany up to Sweden on 2 ferries, and then we got there late at night, and so then it was the second, I think, by the time that we got anywhere that we could get a saddle on and school them, and so that in itself it's different. You're used to training and then going to the show, and so now we have to train, pack everything for 4 days, travel all these miles, and then rev them back up and get it ready to go. And the timing was such that when we go over to Europe for the summer, we get there, we let them like settle, crash, or whatever you want to call it. Then we pick them back up for the shows. This was such a short trip that we had to figure out how to, when we were ready to pick them up, we just had to pick them up and go. Because we got to the venue on a Tuesday and we had a show Friday, so there wasn't time to school them, give a day off, and then go for it. So you had to be careful about saving enough horse in the tank. They were all really high the first day, of course, just from the atmosphere, and to have enough self-control to say, you think you have all this energy, but trust me, you don't really have all this energy. Tomorrow you're going to be really tired. So
Horse line.
managing it, yeah. Little kids like, we want to stay up all night, Mom. I'm like, no, you don't. Go to bed.
Now, the flip side of that in her questions, what was your favorite moment at the World Cup Finals?
My favorite moment was, like I said, during the freestyle, and he was just handling it all really well, and I was finally able to kind of look up and see the crowd, and everything was sold out, and it was packed, and it was just really fun to get to enjoy it in the moment. It's very rare that I feel like you actually ever enjoy it in the moment. Usually it's like when it's all done and you get to look back, then you start to process what you did, but to actually be able to take a breath during the ride once and enjoy it was fun.
Give you another one of her questions. How do you prepare yourself mentally and physically for a competition like this?
Mentally and physically.
Yeah, mentally first.
I like to know, the day of the competition, it's funny, I always talk to Laura and Casey about this, and my teammates, about what we like. I like to go watch the rides before me. I like to see, I want to watch where the clock is. I want to see if anything goes wrong, and if I can kind of learn from that. Laura just does not like to watch anything. She wants to stay in the stables till she goes. And so it's just kind of whatever you like to, I like to go out there and see what's happening. She wants to just hang out and focus on herself and then go out. So it's for sure finding out what works for you. One of the challenges of this this particular World Cup was just the scheduling because it went with the jumpers, obviously, which are a huge draw at the World Cup, so they get a lot of the stadium time. So we had between like 6 and 6:30 in the morning to school in the ring, so which means you were up at 4:30 in the barn to feed and take care of them. And then the classes didn't go until the evening, or then you have another schooling session in the evening. So I got really good at napping, which I'm not normally good at. In fact, I don't think I've ever napped in my whole life. But we'd ride from like 6 to 6:30, and then we'd take care of the horses, and then we'd like have all day to kind of either sit around and like worry about your ride or take a nap. So I took a nap, and then we'd get back on in the evening and ride.
For maintenance of the horse, I'm sure that all the horses were very sound and healthy, but after all this travel, so during those 3 days while you were preparing to show, what were things that you've done with the vet to keep them in good condition?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because of the travel and this, it was something we were very, very worried about. First of all, the hydration and the eating and all that stuff to go there. So we started on I always start mine on electrolyte base the day before they travel. They stay on some mashes and everything while they're traveling. We use, all the things that are legal with the FBI, therapeutic laser a lot, because they're all going to arrive tight and stiff from that journey. We're lucky enough to have the team vet with us and things like this, and she can do acupuncture. She checks them over every day, pre and post work, to make sure there's nothing going on that we missed. And so that a lot of acupuncture, laser, magnetic blankets, that kind of stuff, just to help their muscles relax. And as far as feeding goes, I feed like EC2A, branched chain amino acids that help the muscles recover. So because even though we didn't work them in those 4 days, shipping, standing in a trailer for 15 hours is much more exhausting than being ridden. So I wanted to make sure that they weren't already depleted when they got there, that their bodies were fueled enough that they could pick right up and go into competition.
Is the temperature change a factor to go from Florida to Sweden?
For sure, and I think Salino loved it. If you have one that you want to perk up a little, I think they were like really enjoying it. And so all of the U.S. horses actually seem to handle it really well. I think it's much harder to do the opposite. Much harder to go from somewhere cold to somewhere hot.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you another one of her questions. You mentioned Laura and Casey a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with them. I mean, we've seen the three of you walked out of the global stadium together. Do you think that gives you guys an advantage? Tell us a little bit about the relationship and how it affects your ability to do what you do as a team.
Yeah, I think it's at least in my experience, a very unique situation, and I feel like super, super lucky for it to be able to truly actually be friends with the people on your team, and know that they have your back and that we bounce. I mean, the things that we end up discussing are so silly, but like that conversation I had with Laura about, well, do you go watch? Do you not go watch? This or that? Or, Casey will ask me, well, do I get on in the morning or do I not want to get on? And we bounce off, all these ideas off each other, and it's nice to know that they're going to answer honestly, or they'll tell you, trust your gut. I know that everyone's telling you to do this, but stick with what I've watched you day to day, trust your gut, that kind of thing. And they're super supportive in those moments before, the couple hours before a competition. That's always, at least for me, the hardest time. Up until then, I don't get that, you don't think about it that much, but by the time you got your show clothes on and now you're sitting and you're waiting, they're really good at knowing when to just leave someone alone and when to come in and poke them and crack some jokes and lighten the mood a little bit. And I think we've been around each other enough in those situations that they can tell if someone needs cheering up, if someone needs left alone, if how to kind of help each other through those moments, which is really nice.
And to add to that, your coach, how does that play out, especially with your relationship? And
yeah, it's funny because we've also been with, all of us have been with Debbie for so long that it's almost like, we call her Mama Deb. It's like, well, you better hurry up, Mom's gonna be mad, you're not gonna get to the schooling ring on time. And I've been with Debbie for 14 years now, so it's just really comforting. I always say, not that there's anything groundbreaking that's being said in warm-up, but just having her voice in your ear, having something you're used to, having a system that you're used to makes a huge difference.
What are you doing this summer?
I'm
Colorado.
leaving tomorrow at 3 a.m. to drive to Colorado. And we've been based, Debbie and I were based for many years in Idaho, and that farm has sold now. So last summer I stayed here all year around, and the girls and me decided that was a little too hot. So this year we're gonna go to Colorado. The lady who owns the farm that we're at down here is actually based in Denver, so she's been gracious enough to open up her farm to sell to myself and 14 horses, and so we'll go up there, and then I head to Europe the middle of June. So, and I'll stay. We're gonna do one show probably in Luxembourg, and then we'll do Aachen, and then come back. So it'll be a little bit shorter this year because next year is gonna be a really long stay there. So I'm gonna try to take care of some of the clients and horses at home this year, so they don't all kill me. And then we'll go back to Colorado until probably November, and then head down here.
So what's your routine to stay in shape?
I try to do. I got addicted to Orange Theory down here. So it was just like a high intensity interval training. So I got like all my grooms, I got all the girls going, and it's great because you put your little heart rate monitor on and it comes up on screen. So like for all of us that are competitive, you're like, I need to go faster, I need to get it higher than her, and so that's been fun. And I try to mix it up also with some sort of Pilates type, something that stretches us, because I think riders spend a lot of their time with muscles contracted, you know, in a certain position. So mixing up the routine to where you're getting your muscles to elongate and stretch, I think, is important. I do try to work out about normally 5 days a week. I think it's important, especially when you get on the road and start getting like stressed from travel and all that stuff, and it helps just to make sure your body's fit and healthy. For sure.
Is it fair to say that at this point in your career, this is it? This is what you do? There is no time for a hobby or a social life, or, I mean, is it fair to say that this is it? This is, you know,
Oh, yeah.
Are there days when you wake up and say,
No, you know,
I wanna go bowling?
This is all I've ever wanted to do, which I think makes a big difference. I've had people ask me sometimes when they've debated if they want to do this as a career, you know, and I always say very honestly that this is absolutely all I ever wanted to do ever. I never had a plan B. I didn't care how I worked with horses, but I knew I wanted to, and it's still at times very challenging. You know, it's a very hard lifestyle, so I always say think really hard about it, because if you're waffling at a young age, if this is really what you want to do, maybe you can find a way to be involved in the sport and enjoy the sport without necessarily making this your career, because like you said, there's nothing else. I think I was looking at my calendar, it's going to be like well over 2 months without a day off by the time I get everyone to Colorado. But it's, I mean, I love it and I enjoy doing it, and I'm doing it because I choose to, so I'm not, you know, not begrudging any of it, but that's just what comes with the territory.
You're not, obviously not burned out yet.
No.
I've heard that over the years. I'm so burned out.
Yeah.
So not yet anymore.
No, I'm still really enjoying it. I'm lucky.
Is there ever, and you probably don't have time for it, but is there ever, like, I know even as an amateur showing, you go to a big competition that you're up, and then you come home and there's like a little bit of a lull, or you just don't have time to ever have the downside of that high?
Yeah. I know for sure there's like a crash after it. I think when I finally get to Colorado, maybe I will let down enough for that, but I have enough other clients and horses at home that it's not like you get to get home and then let down. You kind of get home and you're excited to, you know, work with the horses that you left home, and you got students that want lessons, and so it just picks you up and moves you right along.
Cool. Okay.
Question. You didn't mention anything about Pan American Games, so why and what? What can you share about
Yeah, the Pan Ams, unfortunately, are like the weekend immediately after Aachen. And one being in Germany and one being in Peru, it's virtually impossible to do. I had applied for the Pan Ams with my upcoming Grand Prix horse Duval, kind of as a plan B, you know, because you just never knew what was going to happen. I just actually withdrew him yesterday from the selection, because looking in the big picture, looking towards Tokyo, I think it's important to take Salvino to Aachen. They want the top Grand Prix horses to be there. And so if I'm there, then I want my upcoming horse Duval to be there as well, and I'm hoping that he gets scores to get him into Aachen. And so it's kind of like we had to pick one or the other this year, and I thought going to Aachen and being on the Nations Cup there would be the most important. And luckily the U.S., with our silver medal finish at WEG, have secured an Olympic qualifying spot for Tokyo, and so that changes.
How did that first Olympic experience compare to this first World Cup experience?
The first Olympics experience, I mean, the Olympics are amazing because they're the Olympics, you know, they have everything beyond just the equestrian part of it. But at the time, I had qualified as an individual, so I wasn't, you know, riding on a team. So it was just a whole, which is actually a wonderful way to do your first Olympics because there's like not nearly as much pressure. But I really didn't know what I was doing at the time. You know, it was just the first time to see all of it, and we were nowhere in the running of being in the top anything. It was just a really, you know, wonderful experience, a really big honor to get to represent your country in the Olympics. And you know, since then, every bit of the way, you know, we were much more competitive, and you know, we ended up getting the silver, and so the expectations become much higher at the same time. So and you're on a team, and so the pressure is a lot more. But I just feel like at every experience like that, obviously, you learn so much and you grow so much with each of them.
Do you work with a sports psychologist or anything along those lines?
I never have, actually. I probably should. It sounds really neat.
If you aren't riding and you aren't training, are you happy? I know you enjoy outdoor and hiking. How do you let yourself down a little bit? Because you have to, not to burn out at all.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to go to Colorado, like Quinn says, to see a pine tree. I'm very excited to see pine tree. For that reason, because all of the girls in the barn too really enjoy being outside and hiking and camping and all that stuff. And so to be somewhere where we have access to that, I think it's, even if you don't go very often, just knowing that you maybe could go, it's nice to know.
Like the ocean here.
Exactly, yeah, just knowing it's there, that you have that possibility. But it is really important to make sure you do get some balance in it, because I don't want to, like you said, get burnt out. I'm not now, but I don't ever want to get to the place where I feel like it's a burden to have to, you know, to teach or to do all, you know, that stuff. I think we're really lucky to get to do it, and so you can keep it balanced to where you still feel lucky every morning.
Is there anything you would, having gone through what you've gone through and where you are now, is there anything you would have changed? Done anything different?
That's a very good question. I always say no, because then maybe it wouldn't have turned out the way, you know. I mean, there's for sure things that I could have done a lot easier probably, but maybe you wouldn't have learned so much from the experience. And I'm a big believer that the universe kind of works things out for a reason, so just keep going at it.
Stop. I know. Some of us are still waiting.
Like I said earlier, my dream in life was always to just be able to work with horses. And you know, I knew I wasn't going to be happy in a desk job. I knew I wasn't going to be happy doing anything else other than this. I really had no realistic expectations of working with horses at this level when I grew up, because my family they were not a horse show family. We were not a means of buying expensive horses and supporting that kind of lifestyle. And they were always very supportive of me having horses if I was able to raise the money and buy them, you know, essentially buy them myself. And I was allowed to keep them at the farm, but if I wanted another horse, I had to sell the one that I had and purchase the next one. And I'm really glad that they did it that way. I think that's part of why I'm so appreciative of what I have now. You know, they never went out and bought me a fancy horse, but I was allowed to take it as far as I could. If I was able to kind of get there myself, they drive me to all the shows, and they were there cheering on, but they know nothing about horses, and they're not horse people at all. But it was always my thing, and I'm happy that it was able to be like that.
In your current situation, you have a pretty high-profile sponsor. Is there pressure from that to deliver for that, as well as the team and other things?
To have at Salvino's?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, Betsy is an incredible woman, and I really, really have been blessed to find her. She has the same kind of philosophy as Perry had, which was that they like watching the development. You know, Perry was at the ring every day watching his horses, and Betsy every time she can get in town is there watching them. And so I think it's really important to have a sponsor that shares the same kind of goals and the same enjoyment out of it. You know, if it was only a sponsor who wanted to show up at the shows and only wanted to see you win a blue ribbon and that was it, I think that would put a very different kind of pressure and stress on you to have a sponsor who really enjoys the little moments and it's really excited. You know, the first time that the horse did a clean change, like that is just as exciting as, you know, not just as exciting, but it's also exciting, you know, versus just going and seeing them in a show. And so I'm lucky that her, kind of what excites her aligns with what excites me about the training.
I saw, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, you got a VitaFlex award, and Betsy was there in the picture, and I saw that interaction between you guys. And it was so much fun, and it seems a little bit like what you see with you and Casey and Laura, and it's pretty.
It is, yeah. And because all of us, we spend so much time together. Betsy will come to the training camps as well, and so I think the more that you kind of see what goes on behind the scenes too, the more understanding they are of the ups and downs and everything that go into it. That it's not just a straight trajectory. It doesn't just get from A to B to C and then works out perfectly. You think it's going well, and then it crashes, and you got to go back to the drawing board and redo it all. And if you have a sponsor who's willing to be supportive of you and say, that's fine, it didn't work out, let's go figure out how to make it better next time. I think it's much more helpful that way.
I know you talked a little bit about your freestyle with World Cup, and I know you have a big rock and roll background, which is so cool. Do you listen to music at all when you ride?
Always, every day.
Okay. 10 tunes that you would listen to while you're riding.
Well, it kind of depends on the day of the week. Like we usually have our 80s on Friday, get into the Friday mood. On Tuesdays, you usually listen to country because it's a little quieter. So it also depends on who has control of the Sonos player at that moment in our barn.
I did notice that there is music in your barn too, which is nice.
Yes, there is music everywhere always. And the fun thing about our property is that you can control all the music from your phone, including the house that they live at. So if I want to be really mean, I can start blasting Spice Girls at 6 in the morning to get everyone out of bed.
Have you ever done that?
Yes. We also all live on the property here, so it's we're one big little commune down here. We all live and work together.
So, you mentioned Debbie, other people that have inspired you in the sport or outside of the sport?
The ones that are most inspiring to me in the sport are the ones with this ability to work with lots of different horses and keep bringing them up, like the Carl Hesters and the Isabel Worths. And because what's so fascinating to me about this sport, it's wonderful to have one good horse and to perfect that and make that as wonderful and brilliant as it can be. But every horse is so different that I think the ones that can put themselves with the horse psychology and kind of figure out how to take this horse and mold it the way they do, and then all of a sudden just pull out another amazing horse. And they're not always the horses that when you first see them you say, oh my god, that horse is so amazing. It's so interesting about the ones like Carl and Isabel keep pulling out is they're ones that a lot of people would have probably overlooked, but they liked a feeling and they believed in the horse and they knew what fit their style, and they just go home and work at it, and then out they come with another one. And to me that's really inspiring, people that can create it over and over with many different types of horses.
Have you given up on many, Adrienne? Have you had horses where you're like, this just is not going to work? Or do you always stick with it no matter what?
Was this men or horses?
You pick.
I wouldn't say I've given up on any, but I also think you have to be realistic if they're not happy doing their job. There's definitely been some where the owner really wanted it to be a Grand Prix horse, and you give it a good shot, and then you say, what, this is a lovely small tour horse. He's so happy doing his job. Let him go be happy for someone. Don't keep trying to push him to be what he's not. And I wouldn't say that's giving up on it. I'd say that's finding its appropriate path, and sometimes it ends up that we buy him as a dressage horse and they don't want a dressage and they jump. So rather than saying I'm going to force you to be a dressage horse, find what its calling is and let it go be that.
With your eventing background, do you do any cavalettis? Do you do any jumping? Do you cross training with your horses that you have on, or you've got jumps on the farm?
We do some cavalettis. So Salvino is supposed to start jumping soon here. I think I want to jump him.
You do.
Little, I don't jump very big anymore. But yeah, we have, because Bob McDonald, Debbie's husband, does the hunters and jumpers, and so we have at our farm a big jumping ring with jumps and cavalettis and all that stuff set up, and so we do take him out there a fair amount.
Cool.
I have a question. If I had been Salvino's with the World Cup we just went to, I would have had jet lag. Do you have more time for any of these other shows? Do they give you time to go before the show or after the training?
When we go over to Europe for the summer, for an extended amount of time, we go over 2 or 3 weeks before the first show. for that reason. But this trip, I mean, mostly for the reason that we all have clients and horses at home, and you can't just, just leave a month to go for one competition. It's just not realistic. So, I mean, that's kind of the main reason we do that. They for sure have jet lag on the way back, though. Like the horses do, because you go through, they have to quarantine for 2 days. So they go to Miami, and then they're just in stalls for 2 days, and you can go in and see them, but they're not, allowed to leave or anything. And everyone's always so worried about, 2 days of them just being in a stall. Like, all they do is sleep. They're so tired when they get home. They're quiet. They're perfectly happy to not be touched for 2 days. And they're actually happy to leave to get some quiet time.
And Salvino being a stallion, does that affect who he is and how you work with him? Is he different than some of the guys before?
Yeah, stallions are different for sure. He's my first one that I've had at this level, and it's been a really interesting learning game about how you approach them and how you solve through problems and stuff. And they're definitely not as straightforward as a mirror or a gelding. Like, you're not just gonna be like, you're gonna do this. You have to kind of find ways around it so that it never becomes a confrontation with them. One of the biggest challenges with him has not been so much the riding, but the traveling, because I feel kind of bad for them when they travel, because everything in them is telling them they have to take care of their herd. So they're stressed out the whole time about watching where every other horse is, and you take a horse away. And so he's been lucky that he's now like bonded at the hip with Dublé. Dublé and him, they can touch without dividers. He's like the only horse that he's not stallion with. They just put their heads next to each other. I told Casey that when she retires Dublé, he's going to have to just continue to travel the world as Salvino's like service animal. When he's with him, he's like totally like the easiest traveler in the world, but I'm actually like dreading ever having to go anywhere without him, so she has to qualify for everything.
A little pressure for Casey, okay.
Do you always use the same transport for your horse? Or
What?
do they provide different transports?
When we're in Europe right now, I think the team's contracted with a company called Gilesid, so they do all of our transport over there, and they know our horses pretty well, and they're easy to work with.
So what are your 5 tips from amateurs trying to go up, like if you have 5 bullet points?
I did not prepare bullet points.
Okay, there's
Be
the
more
pressure.
specific.
Well, because you've done it, because you started as a kid and you had the wild ponies and you blah, 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 and now here you are. So for the rest of the universe, most of the universe, that probably is just still kind of doing the grind, having gone through those stages, what are some things that you would probably tell your students or, anybody that you're helping along the way?
I think one important thing, at least that I've taken from my story, is that it's very cliche, but like if you work hard and if you just keep your nose down, like it will be noticed. Like I said, I had no intention of going to River Grove to Debbie to be a rider ever. I was going to go clean tack and tack up horses, and I was like totally happy to do that in exchange for my lesson. I didn't go in there, thinking that I should be more than that or thinking that I should be allowed to ride the horses. And I think that if kids really, really just work hard and are appreciative of the opportunities, and you can absorb so much knowledge without being the rider necessarily, just being around that doors do open. But that being said, you also have to be prepared to, if that's what you want, to sacrifice a lot. I dropped out of college, I moved away from my family, I went instantly, without a question, everywhere that I knew I had to go. It was never like, oh, that's rather inconvenient for me. Maybe I'll meet you guys 6 months out of the year. It was like, now we're going to California. Okay, now I moved to California. Now we're going to Florida. Okay, sell my house, move to Florida. And so, if you wanted to pursue it at that level, I think you have to be realistic about what you're going to sacrifice. And if you don't want to pursue it at that level, that's completely fine too. But then be realistic about what are you putting in versus what do you expect to get out. Because I think there's sometimes some unhappiness because they have a pipe dream or a goal, but they're not super realistic about what they're willing to sacrifice to get there. And you don't have to do it at the top level for sure. I mean, you can enjoy this sport a lot and have it be part of your life without being your whole life, and that's also completely fine.
How many days a week do you work your horses and bringing them up the levels, and does that change as from the lower levels to the upper levels then? Because I know Carl Hester and Charlotte were doing just every other day and doing hacking or lunging and 3 days a week of real work, and that's the way Meg ran pretty horse when I had him. His trainer brought him up that way, but often other people I know say, well, you really need to progress and do 5 days a week or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
I think for sure it depends a little bit on the horse, but I definitely think most people over school. You know, and I think any vet will tell you that what's so hard on the horse is the repetitive motions, that we probably don't need to practice 30 half passes just to know that we can do it. You know, you can do a lot of building their strength and building their understanding and things outside of the movements. We normally, like lesson wise, I'd say 3 days a week of like work, and then during the, you know, when you're in competition, of course, maybe you work 4 days a week, and maybe you work a little bit more than in the off season, but for sure not more than 4 days a week do we ever like do actual dressage work. I take several of my horses to the aqua trainer, the aqua treadmill, to keep their fitness up. You know, we'll go out hacking, like they do cavaletti work. I think cross training, and coming from the eventing world, I think that sometimes fitness is something that's overlooked a little bit in the dressage world. We get so hung up on wanting to perfect a movement that we forget that there's also the conditioning of their body, which is hugely important. You know, being any athlete, you wouldn't just practice the one movement over and over. You have to make yourself fit and make your body athletic, and keep the repetitive movements, like I said, to a minimum, so that hopefully their longevity is there. You know, I think there's no reason we should be retiring our Grand Prix horses at 13 or 14.
So with Salvino, by the time you get back from Europe and are at Colorado and now Tokyo's on the horizon, I know horses surprises and circumstances change, but what do you foresee as the roadmap in his training regimen?
So he's had a couple, like when we got back from World Cup, he's had a couple of easy weeks. He just kind of was trotted around and had some downtime. And now we'll start to pick him back up. You know, when we get to Colorado, we'll start to increase his work now for the summer. So we'll have about a month to prepare before we go to Europe. And then when we're in Europe for that month, it's a little more intensive training, obviously with the shows, and then come back, and then we have to let him down a little bit again. We're debating about doing a show in the fall. They have the CDI in California in November this year, so that's something we're throwing around. Is it feasible to drive to there from Colorado and maybe support that show and do something so that we're not only showing in the 3 months here? Because I think it's hard to manage them properly and to be expected to complete all your qualifiers in a 3-month season. But a lot of it is looking already that far in advance. Like we've already sat down and planned back from the qualifiers and what time do they need to recover, when are they going to need, to have some off time, and then how much time do you need to build them back up and be in the peak performance, because it's the end game that you have to keep training for sure, not just the immediate you want.
So I've asked you this question before in various interviews, and usually your answer is something that we all already know. And I say, tell us something about Adrienne Lyle that nobody knows. It's usually music, so what else don't we know?
What else do I know? I'm not that mysterious. I mean, you already kind of know that I like doing outdoor stuff, and I really love camping. I love going to music festivals, that kind of stuff. If I do
Secret
that outside
pleasure,
of
then.
horses.
Secret thing that you do, eat, drink, whatever. Something we don't know.
No, when you live with me, what do I do that's weird?
Something
Besides
fattening.
eating cereal in my sleep sometimes.
Oh, that's a good one. Lucky Charms?
Fruit Loops.
Fruit Loops.
There has been an occasional time when I've come back to Europe and like the time change has been off, so I've taken an Ambien and woken up holding a cereal box. Probably should not be publicly disclosed.
We won't use it, but it's fun to know. Thanks, it's great.
I think one thing that I'm finding myself getting more and more passionate about is the coaching and being able to bring up young riders. I have Quinn who rides with me, and I've got a couple other really talented kids at the moment, and it's really fun to get to see these kids with the same kind of passion that I had, and maybe try to help them, a little bit in the direction they want to go. And right now I feel really lucky because I have a group of great kids and they're super supportive of each other, and they're all really passionate, they're really committed to it. That's something that's been really fun for me to kind of get to cultivate at the moment. Yeah. Yeah, I work with other trainers and amateurs and stuff. I do enjoy teaching, and I think that's something that coming up through the Pony Club, they were really big on teaching. You always had to teach the lower levels and younger kids and stuff like that. So I've done that my whole life, and I do enjoy that a lot.
All right, we're gonna cut you a break because you do have a 3 o'clock departure tomorrow morning. So we'll do if you help us with the.
Door prizes.
Great. Yes. What are we wrestling on? Okay. Oh, wow, nice. Vicky,
Certificate? Your certificate
Oh, yeah, to Bath and Spa.
for bed and spa and wellness. $100, nice.
Julia Felder.
Nice. Courtesy of JRPR.
No, courtesy of Vitaflex.
Like,
Adrienne's great sponsor.
Lily.
okay. 2 bags.
Nancy Peterson.
Hey.
Hi.
Congratulations.
Alan.
Alan Chabon.
There you go.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you
So much.
Thank you. Next talk will be determined date, but it will be Kelly Lane. Right? Johnny?
What's that?
Kelly Lane?
We think so. We haven't actually heard from Kelly, but we didn't hear from Adrienne, and we went right ahead with it.
Thank you. Okay.